All right, guys, let's get this underway. So welcome to this online workshop slash webinar slash virtual training today, funded by the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions edition. My name is Ross Minney, and I'm going to be your presenter today on this webinar. And the topic of today's webinar is essential tools for moving your workforce to be able to work from home in these times. So the format of today is going to be approximately a 45, 50-minute webinar, and then we're going to have some time at the end available for questions. So as we're going through the webinar, just make note of just any questions that you might have on the content that we're going through, and either put them in the Q&A feature built into the Zoom interface, or there is a chat feature as well, but try and keep it into the Q&A part of Zoom. Just makes it a lot easier to track if we can. Cool. All right. Formalities out of the way. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years. I've worked for various sort of IT companies, consultancy companies, helping small businesses of various sizes, all the way up to corporate and government enterprise customers as well. I'm passionate about helping customers make the most of technology, and in particular, improving their business through the use of that technology. In 2006, I founded DevHouse, which is a custom software development agency, and we predominantly build enterprise and government software solutions. So up until recently, my teams were predominantly distributed, and now, after what's been going on, we're 100% distributed. So I've been working with remote teams for pretty much my entire IT career, so I'm pretty experienced in this area. I also run a managed IT support business, which we launched shortly after DevHouse, and this provides managed IT support solutions for small to medium enterprise. Cool. So just a little bit about the ASPAS program, if you're not aware of how that works. It's a government-funded program which runs till June 2021. It's available for all for-profit businesses that have less than 19 employees. And the aim of the program is to increase digital competency and capacity of small businesses and increase the number of businesses using and making the most of digital tools on a day-to-day basis, right? So this webinar is very relevant to that. Every small business ABN has access to 24 hours total of advisory over the lifespan of the program. And this particular session today counts as 1 hour towards that quota. The 4 areas covered by the program, which you can see here, are websites and selling online, social media and digital marketing, using small business software, which this webinar fits squarely into, and online security and data privacy, which is also relevant here as well. So you can check out more about the program at businessstation.com.au. In addition to programs or webinars like this, we also provide one-on-one advisory where we can take a deep dive into your business. If you did want to go down that route, this service is heavily subsidized at $40 plus GST for the first hour, and then $60 plus GST for every hour after that. And there's also usually, in normal times, in-person workshops, which are also available through the program as well. And these are usually 2-hour sessions where you obviously are able to get a bit more contact going on with the presenters, and you get a bit more hands-on with the topic at hand as well. So yeah, you're obviously familiar with how to book for online virtual workshops and webinars like this that you're listening to now. But yeah, check out businessstation.com.au for more information, and the business and Business Station also does cover a range of other things to assist small businesses not related to the ASPAS program, as well as things like just general business startup advice. So absolutely check them out. So today's webinar, what are we going to learn? So in in a nutshell, this is it. So we're going to be looking at some of the tools to consider when relocating your workforce to home or some other sort of remote location, and the benefits of using these tools and how they fit into that landscape. And we're going to be looking a little bit at the approaches of how to be working with distributed teams using these tools, trying to choose the right solution and right tool and the right approach for your business with these. And then we're going to have the Q&A session at the end. Some of the tools that we're going to be looking at today are going to be covering areas like how to communicate more effectively with your team when they're working from home. So this basically is not only looking at the tools themselves, but also the mindset change that needs to go along with using these tools as a business owner. We're going to be also looking at how to share most effectively your team resources and your assets and documents and spreadsheets and those types of sort of things, and line of business software with your staff members when they're working remotely. Another challenge also is how to coordinate your projects, to-do lists, tasks, that type of thing. So you can take a look at that. And something that's really important that often gets overlooked is how to identify how you can keep data secure in this type of distributed workforce arrangement. So we'll cover stuff in that area as well. So why are we here? Why is this relevant now? The elephant in the room is obviously COVID-19, and the world has changed. So it's pretty clear that many more people are working from home more than ever before. In Australia, we're obviously getting through this a little bit less painfully, it seems, than other areas. So we are looking at maybe opening up a little bit more rapidly than other countries. But I think the world, to some degree, has permanently changed. And in my opinion, that's for the better. But we still are not sure how this is going to continue to impact us. We don't have a vaccine and won't have one for a while yet. We don't know how the landscape is going to be panning out over the next 12, 18, 24 months. So I think it's important that business owners are trying to prepare themselves as much as possible to potentially work out how they're going to be operating over that period of time moving forward. It definitely makes sense to try and future-proof our businesses and ensure that if hurdles like this are going to be coming up in future, if it's not COVID-19, it could be some type of other challenge. So having the processes and the tools in place to be able to manage remote teams, I think, is really important. And there's definitely a lot of other benefits that go along with managing remote teams as well. You're not having to pay for office space. Teams have more flexibility. You often have happier employees, those types of benefits, and these pay a lot of dividends. So why are remote teams different, and why is managing them different? So it comes down to the communication being inherently different for the most part. And sometimes this requires a bit of a mind shift from traditional workplaces, because you just can't get up and walk across the room, chat to somebody at somebody else's desk and ask them a question, right? You can't assume also that someone is busy just because they're sitting at their desk working away. There's inherently a increased level of trust that's going to be required when we need to have people working remotely. And because of that, we need to some degree, we need to embrace an outcomes-based approach to tracking progress rather than just raw time input, which has often been the case in the past. So, one of the immediate sort of side effects of working from home is that it just simply leads to more emails, which just simply isn't ideal. One of the mindset changes that I think and one of the myths, in my opinion, that we do need to get over is, and this is what I've kind of written here, this interruptions versus interruptions, is that yes, people working from home and other remote locations are probably going to have more interruptions. There's a lot of homeschooling going on. The fridge is close by. all those types of things. So they are going to have more interruptions, but at the same time, they're probably going to have less interruptions from other co-workers, probably interrupting them for unnecessary purposes most of the time. So this is why I've got to kind of frame this in this way. So our goal that we should be trying to look to when we're managing remote teams, or one of the goals at least, is we should be trying to minimize the amount of interruptions. The way, and this will become clear as we go through this webinar, one of the ways that we do that is to try and move communications to asynchronous communications rather than synchronous communications. And that basically means not expecting an immediate response to a communication or an email or things of that nature. So we'll dive in a little bit deeper as we go through. That'll become clear. So we're just going to start off with the basics, general sort of synchronous communication. So when we think of this, usually it's just, you think of phone calls, you ring somebody up, you're talking to them, they're talking back at you. But when we're looking at synchronous communication with remote teams, usually we prefer to use some sort of other solution rather than just ringing them on the phone. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and that'll become clearer as we go through the next couple of slides. But the question we're asking here is, how do we work with people in real time when they're in remote locations? Obviously, the solutions to these problems these days are products such as Zoom, and Microsoft Teams has become a big player in this space in recent times. But there's also other solutions like Google Hangouts, and obviously Skype has been around forever, and it kind of has features that can be useful in this space, but it really hasn't gained a huge amount of traction from a business perspective. And then we sort of contrast all of this with traditional phone calls, right? Or traditional sort of audio conferencing. So solutions like Zoom and Microsoft Teams are great because they allow for additional features like screen sharing and the whiteboarding of things. And you can do great things like what we're doing at the moment. You can do webinars, so you can distribute content to a large number of people in an easy way. Microsoft Teams is actually included for free now with the Microsoft Office subscriptions, or most of the Microsoft Office subscriptions. So it's this good solution if you're already in the Microsoft sort of ecosystem or the Microsoft world. And Zoom is a good solution if you're just looking for a quick solution to get you up and running in this area. So it's actually free, entirely free for one-to-one meetings. And you can also do more than 2 people in a meeting if you want, but it is limited to 40 minutes unless you get one of their paid plans. But that's not a big deal. If you're doing short meetings, that's fine. You can always just start another call if you want to immediately after that. So both of these are pretty good options, in my opinion. Yeah, and as I said, businesses use these tools in different ways. So sometimes you can just run traditional meetings. Sometimes you can be using them to present to a large number of people in webinars like this. But I've also seen it being used with calls that have somewhere between like 30 and 100. I was on a call the other day that had 300 people on a regular Zoom call. So it wasn't a webinar like this. It had 300 people in it and it didn't miss a beat. And that was just primarily for delivering a one-to-many sort of webinar, or it was kind of interactive, so it needed that two-way communication. So you can do all sorts of things with it, and it definitely has a place in this synchronous communication landscape. So once again, why? We might be asking ourselves at this point, why is it important to have video conferencing tools like this rather than just sort of jumping on the phone, right? And the biggest thing for me, and I think most people will agree, is that body language really, really matters. Being able to see sort of an immediate feedback and response from what you're saying, I think is super important. And it's pretty hard to read the room, right? When you're just trying to take what you're hearing from just audio cues. The old saying goes, over 50% of communication is actually visual, right? And on phone calls, half the time, the audio quality itself is pretty terrible as well. And that's one of the other benefits of these platforms, is that typically they have a much better audio quality than your average phone call. And hopefully you're hearing that in my voice at the moment. So team members also feel more connected, in my opinion. So it's as simple as that. Frankly, everyone is feeling pretty isolated at the moment. Remote teams often feel isolated. And this type of communication, if nothing else, ensures that they're like part of the team and they're part of something bigger. It sounds pretty cheesy, but it's true. Community matters even at work. And I've listed some of the other sort of benefits here on the slide, in that you can do things like screen sharing with these tools. You can do whiteboard features. And I just wanted to mention a really cool tool that you can use in conjunction with these tools, and it's called Crisp. And essentially what it does is it filters your audio so that any background noise, I'm not using it today because I'm recording this in a fairly quiet environment, but if you were having a call with somebody, say in a cafe or in a more noisy environment, it will actually filter out all of the background noise that you have. It's a two-way thing as well. It actually, if you're using it on your PC, it will also filter out audio that might be coming from the other participants as well in that meeting. So I thought I'd just mention that because it's a really cool tool that you might want to check out when using things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. So there's so many sort of options in this area. So how do you choose between all these solutions? So I'll obviously mention that obviously Zoom and Microsoft Teams right now are the tried and true leaders in this space. But if you did have to start looking at different options, the most important thing that I would be looking at here is looking at the video quality that the solution provides. I've seen so many solutions which look great, they've got great features, but the video quality is just terrible. The delay is bad, and there's nothing more that can ruin a productive meeting than having audio visual problems throughout the meeting. It just interrupts the flow of the meeting, and it's just not worth the time. You're definitely better off paying a few extra dollars and maximizing the productivity and the output that you're getting from the people that are participating in the meetings. So put that at the top of the list in terms of the thing that you're looking for when choosing a solution. But after the platform sort of holds up in terms of video quality and reliability, then I would move on to looking at what features that obviously that provides. I'll be honest here, most of them have very, very similar features in this context. You can share screens, you can have that whiteboard feature. They're the two kind of big things. There are auxiliary sort of features that Zoom has, like breakout rooms and things like this, and that might be applicable in your scenario. But I would also be looking at things like if you're very Microsoft centric, for example, you're running all of the other Microsoft applications, then definitely check out Microsoft Teams because it plays well with other Microsoft products. The same with Google Hangouts, right? So if you're ingrained in the G Suite environment, you're using Google Docs, that type of thing, check out Google Hangouts. The video quality is not terrible on that. It's just less popular. And the other thing I'll mention as well is that Microsoft Teams does have a very large, I guess, business chat component to it. So in this area, it's actually a competitor to Slack, which I'm going to be mentioning soon. Yeah, so the benefit there is it kind of kills two birds with one stone. But obviously Zoom, we're on a Zoom call right now. Zoom pretty much has majority market share in this kind of space. So as I said, talking about Slack, wherever you can, having a platform where you can communicate asynchronously is really important. So Traditionally, when we think about asynchronous communication, we think of email, right? You send an email, you don't expect an immediate response. But email is pretty clunky. It's got its place, no doubt. But it's not great, obviously, for general chit chat or general discussion. It's not great when you're trying to discuss many different topics at the same time. And it's not great at bridging that gap between fully asynchronous and synchronous communication, which is where these sort of instant messaging sort of chat solutions lie, I guess. So once again, the two big leaders in this space at the moment are Slack and Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Teams does fill that dual role at the moment in terms of being a business chat and also a video conferencing solution. Once again, if you're Microsoft centric, Microsoft Teams is a good one to look at in this space. It doesn't always have to be that way. I'm extremely Microsoft centric, and in terms of business applications, yet I still use Zoom predominantly. That's perfectly fine. But some of the features that they are coming out with are definitely taunting me in the way of Microsoft Teams. Slack is still by far the tried and true sort of business instant messaging platform of choice, though. So we use Slack, and it is definitely the choice for a lot of businesses, particularly technology-based businesses. And generally the way that these instant sort of chat or business chat platforms work is in kind of the following way. You have channels that you create, and these channels can correspond to anything. I'll give you some examples. So they could be one channel per project that you might be working on. That may not work for all businesses. You could have one channel per customer, which is actually what we do. Or you could have one channel per team or department, because in a lot of businesses, obviously, you might have thousands of customers. Having one channel per customer is completely not practical. So it really depends on the business, but essentially one channel essentially is a compartmentalized way of keeping all chats to do with a particular topic or customer in this case, or project in this case, all in one place. So if you did need to refer back to it, you can. And as I said before, these platforms don't just need to be for high-tech businesses. They work across a number of industries and are a good way to easily discuss maybe small issues, or get in touch with individuals in your organization without necessarily having to sort of get up and walk over and bug them. And in this case, obviously, they work in remote situations when you're having to deal with distributed workforce. So you're not having to ring them on the phone. So, or go to the effort of writing a dedicated email for trivial things sometimes. So once again, how do we choose between the platforms? So once again, I'll say the two big leaders are obviously Slack and Microsoft Teams. But the important things to consider here are a few things. First off, I'll just say reliability in this space is not, I won't say it's not as important, but it's certainly very easy to create a reliable chat program, right? So typically any solution you will come across in this space will be reasonably reliable. It's essentially just sending text backwards and forwards. So it's not as big a issue as trying to find a reliable video solution. Firstly, I'd probably say go with what your staff are actually familiar with, because in this space, people are most likely to use a platform that they are familiar with or one that they have used before. And with these platforms, making sure the staff actually use it is kind of half the battle. It's definitely going to be a lot easier to adopt something with the support of your team, rather than just sort of telling them, we're going to use this, deal with it. Second to that, I'd be looking at things like functionality and integrations. And this is probably a big thing when when looking to choose one of these platforms. Integrations are often what turn these sort of basic chat tools into something which is a real powerhouse of a product to use in your business. So some of these integrations might look like, can you integrate it with your, say, your task or job management system and have notifications from that piped through to your chat system so that you can see those notifications happening in real time and in the context of the conversations that are happening around that particular project or customer? Can you integrate it with your accounting system to have notifications about payments or invoices or that type of stuff piped through to similar sorts of areas? That may not be applicable for all staff members, but can you do those types of things? That's the question. Can you integrate it with, say, your document management system so that users and your staff are kept up to date with important changes that are happening on documents that they're collaborating on? Does it integrate with other systems so you can keep a pulse on your customers' movements and communications, or your social media channels, or other things that might be important to your business? So Slack has a lot of the integrations, being the leader in the space for so long. However, Microsoft Teams has come a long way in terms of these types of integrations of late as well. So it is definitely an upcoming contender in that space. And once again, I'll mention it again, if you are in the Microsoft ecosystem, Microsoft Teams is definitely good to look at if you've already paid for it. So yeah, and once again, Slack has a very good free plan though. I will mention that you don't need to go out and pay for Slack unnecessarily. So cool. And once again, why are we looking at asynchronous communication? This comes back to the mindset change, right? So there's a huge trend towards minimizing unnecessary meetings these days. It's kind of a fad that I think everybody's glad for, but they're getting on the bandwagon. Minimizing unnecessary meetings, I think, is definitely a good thing. Asynchronous communications are definitely a way of achieving that. The first step of this was obviously email, sending a bajillion emails backwards and forwards. Instant messaging is obviously a lot quicker and easier than email. It's less formal, and it's also much easier to compartmentalize conversations on a platform such as Slack or Teams. Using the channels that we spoke about. It's a lot easier to also quickly share documents as well. So yeah, there's definitely a lot in that space that lends itself to asynchronous communication. So email still has its place, especially if you need a sort of formal paper trail, or you need the information to be easily retrievable. Once again, the integration features are really where this shines. So if we're looking at why we're going down this route, being able to see instant updates about the operations of your business in the context of the communications that are happening around that between your team members is really something that streamlines your business and gets everybody on the same page. And that leads into my next point, is that everybody can be kept in this situation with channels. Everybody can be kept in the loop of conversations that sometimes would otherwise might not intentionally, but they might unnecessarily be kept private. So in this setup, there's definitely more transparency. But if you do choose to, you can still have the private conversation and chats if you want to. One of the things that one of the good features of this is where possible, staff members, if they are trying to stay focused on something, they can easily temporarily mute notifications. So you're not unnecessarily distracting your team. And there are features to generally override this type of notification muting in emergencies if you did want to. So let's move on from the obvious and move into something such as time management. And one of the obvious ones here is internal scheduling. And these types of features have been in things like Microsoft Office and G Suite for some time, but they become way more important when we're looking at remote teams. So more than ever, we need to be making sure staff are using the scheduling features built into the tools that they're already using. So if they're already using Outlook via Office 365 or a paid version of G Suite, yeah, I mean, if they're not already using it, it's super cheap to get on this bandwagon. But what these tools allow you to do is, where it makes sense, you can share calendars between staff members. Failing that, you can see, at the very minimum, you can see the availability of staff in your organization when they have meetings or when they're unavailable. So if you are trying to plan a shared call or a meeting or an event or a meetup or something, you can at least see when everybody's going to be available. And they also have a heap of other collaboration tools that help out with remote teams, things like shared mailboxes where it makes sense, shared contact lists, and other sort of shared resources like that as well. So this type of tool, in my opinion, is a no-brainer. Most are probably already using this to some degree, but they're likely, a lot of the time, they're not using the calendar sort of sharing component of this, or they're not using the availability checker sort of component. And this, as I said, becomes much more important when you're dealing with remote teams. Yeah, so cool. So then there comes the challenge of how do you deal with people from a time management perspective that are external to your operation. So this previous slide, we were talking about people that are internal to your organization. And whilst it is possible to technically share your calendar with people outside the organization using Office 365 and G Suite, the setup that they use isn't always ideal. And you also don't want to be telling everybody essentially your entire availability. This is sometimes suboptimal. You typically want to be only providing external parties a select set of times when you might be available to take calls or take meeting schedules. So this is where a third-party booking system comes in. So rather than sort of the constant communications backwards and forwards, trying to organize time between several parties and so forth, you can simply send a booking link to a customer or an external party and just ask them to choose a time. And you can configure that tool to not only allow a certain range of times and dates that they are available to choose from, but it'll also synchronize with your regular sort of Office or G Suite calendar to ensure that they're not booking in times where it conflicts with other appointments that are already in those calendars. And it also has the great features in it which ensure that you're not unnecessarily creating like back-to-back meetings, which can be a pain because it adds in automatic buffer times between meeting bookings and so forth. The big thing here is that it saves time. So you're not sending unnecessary emails backwards and forwards. And one of the keys to successfully sort of working from home or working remotely is that, once again, we want to minimize those unnecessary interruptions because we probably have enough of them already. Okay, so document sharing. We're going through all the kind of obvious ones here, but there's a few that I think you'll find really, really valuable soon. But document collaboration, once again, you just need to be, there's the obvious solutions in this space. This is the place that you're obviously going to be storing all your documents, so your spreadsheets, your Word documents, whatever, your presentations, that type of thing. These work in pretty much the same way. Once again, I'll provide the advice here. If you're already working with the Microsoft suite of applications, my recommendation would be to try and use the Microsoft solutions for this. So the two solutions, Microsoft solutions for this, are OneDrive and SharePoint. OneDrive is good if you just want a basic setup, and it might be just a few staff members, or it's definitely applicable if it's just yourself. But SharePoint is much more applicable if you have more than just a few members, and it provides for a solid and robust setup for document management and so forth. If you're already using G Suite for your email and you're using Google Docs, then obviously the solution there is to use Google Drive for your file or third-party file solution in the cloud here. Dropbox is definitely another option here. And in my opinion, this has a particularly good use case when you are storing files in the cloud that are large files and are typically like from third-party applications. So the examples that I've got here are Photoshop files, which are very, very large sometimes, are like AutoCAD files. If you're working with other types of graphics design files, it's often good. And the reason why this is a good solution in this situation is that Dropbox has a really nice, what they call a Delta file change feature in it. And essentially this means that when you are uploading files to the cloud system, it's only uploading the change in the file when you're making a very small change to that document. A lot of the other solutions, when you're making these types of file changes, unfortunately upload the entire file, and that's not optimal when the file is super, super large. So Dropbox is one that works with these files in a really great way. And Microsoft Office has its own kind of solution for dealing with these types of file changes when you're dealing with OneDrive and SharePoint, but it's not particularly great at doing it with other types of files that don't fit into the Microsoft ecosystem. So that's where the Dropbox solution really sort of shines, and where you might want to consider using it for when you're storing large files like Photoshop or AutoCAD files or some other type of line of business application software outside of the Microsoft or G Suite. So here we go, password sharing. So password management becomes particularly important when you're in a distributed environment. Often the weakest link in terms of security is always the humans, unfortunately. So sending passwords backwards and forwards via emails or instant messages is just not really all that ideal. Ideally, you should be using something called a password manager. So what a password manager is a piece of software that you install on your computer, and it's a service that you also sign up to. And the software integrates with your web browser typically. And when you sign up for the service, it'll store a password for a website that you might be logging into. It'll store that in an encrypted way in the cloud that only you will be able to decrypt and access. One of the big key features of these pieces of software that's really relevant now is that they have a password sharing feature in them. So you can share passwords securely with other people. And in addition to that, what's more is that not only can you share the password, but you can actually share access to that service or the website or the software without actually needing that other person to be able to read the password, which is really great, because sometimes you want to share access to the software, but you don't necessarily want them to be able to take that password and give it to somebody else. The way this works is that when you share the password with them, they also need to be running their own version of the password manager as well. And you essentially share the password with them, and when they go to that website or the piece of software, it will automatically populate it with the username and password. They won't actually be able to see what that password is, but they will be able to log into the software. Obviously, this is really ideal in situations where you only have one login for the software. However, where possible, if the software does allow for it, it's always preferable to try and have separate logins for your different staff members where possible. And it's particularly important if you're able to assign granular permissions so they only are able to access areas of the software that that they need to have access to in order to be able to do their job or do their job function. There's no need to be assigning people unnecessary sort of global administrative access to software when you don't need to. There are a lot of solutions in the space, but the ones that I'd probably suggest that you have a look at are either LastPass or 1Password. They're very, very similar features. And when you're choosing a solution in the space, I would always make sure that you are choosing a password manager solution that has something called two-factor authentication. So what that means is that you will need to have a second piece of the puzzle, usually your mobile phone, in order to be able to access the password management account on a new computer that you might be installing the password manager on. You won't need to use it every time that you log into a website, but you will need to use it if you're installing the software again on a computer, or if you happen to log out of the password management software for whatever reason and needed to log back in. And this just ensures that obviously if someone was to get the credentials for your password manager, that they wouldn't be able to access all of your passwords, obviously. So definitely have a password manager that has that two-factor authentication feature in it, just to keep all of your passwords secure. All right, moving on. When we're in remote teams, one of the biggest challenges that we have is not being able to, I guess, share things visually with people, right? So in an office, you can just get up and walk over to someone's desk and you can maybe just show them something on their screen, or you can show them something on your laptop screen. But communicating visual things remotely like that is a lot harder. And this is where things like screen capture software or like screenshotting software or screen recording tools really come in handy. They allow you to very quickly, at the click of a single button, just to record either just a part of your screen, or if you want, you can record your full screen with or without audio if you want. And then what you can do is very, very quickly just send them a super quick link to that recording or the screenshot. So this means that you don't have to worry about sort of screwing about with emailing like videos or video files or editing screenshots are kind of a thing of the past with this. The end user or the staff member that you're sending it to just gets a link. They click on the link, the video plays. They've got nothing further to do from that. It's super quick for you. It's quick for them. There's minimal sort of stuffing about with getting things into emails. These types of things communicate something that is sometimes complicated in a short period of time, and then you can even send it to your entire team if you wanted to, or you can do what we do, and we actually build an entire library of small training videos for our staff. So it's a really sort of quick way of communicating visual ideas and issues across a distributed team. And once again, it comes back to this whole sort of, it's an asynchronous thing. You're not bugging people to show them how to use something or this concept that you're trying to describe, and you're not wasting other people's time with meetings and so forth. Document signing. So document signing can also be challenging remotely, right? You can't physically walk up and sign a document. It's less than ideal to be posting things around, but there's a lot of online solutions for being able to digitally sign documents. The leader in this field is DocuSign. I'd check that out, but there are others like Adobe Sign and PandaDoc, and there's several others as well. Most of them work in exactly the same way. You're uploading the document and you can send it out to recipients for them to be able to essentially you just give it a digital signature, and it does that digital signature through a variety of different ways, and you can track the audit sort of flow. But the main key here is if you're going to be trying to choose a solution, try and choose something that fits within your budget. Firstly, a couple of them are expensive, but choose something that fits within your budget. And probably most importantly, find something that works into your sort of workflow. So if it integrates with your existing software or systems, a lot of them do, and can be sort of tied in with other elements of your operations easily, then that's probably the most important thing to consider here, in my opinion. The other thing to consider in this space is that some of these solutions typically have certain levels of compliance when it comes to security and document management criteria. So if you are in some industries, checking out what compliance level you might need might be important, but for the vast majority of businesses, this isn't too important. Okay, we move on to project management tools. This is a big area. You could do an entire webinar just on project management tools. There's such a vast array of project management tools on the market, and of late there's been a huge, massive boom in this area. What I've got on the screen are just some examples, but the number one piece of advice that I can provide here to try and choose a piece of software in this space is try and choose one that is most suited to your particular industry. There are a lot of project management tools which are very specific to specific industries. So for example, if you're a builder, there is a lot of project management software packages specifically written for builders. If you're a tradie, there's lots of project management or job management software tracking tools for that, like ServiceMate and so forth. If you're in the technology space, there's an overwhelming amount of solutions that make sense, like particularly the ones that I've got on the screen. But a lot of these solutions that I've got up here also can work in a lot of other industries as well, because they are kind of generic enough where they can work in other industries. So, and then there comes solutions which are super generic. So I would probably put Trello almost in that camp as being super generic, because it's not very feature rich in my opinion. And then you have things like Microsoft Project, which is obviously a traditional project management tool, which has timelines and flowcharts and Gantt charts and that type of thing. But you will find elements of those types of features in a lot of the ones that I've got on the page here at the moment. So once again, if you can get something specific to your industry, go down that route. So once again, if you're going to be choosing, get something that's industry specific, optimizing your workflow as much as possible is probably the most important thing here. And that's where industry specific packages really shine, because they know how builders work. For example, they know how tradies work. Second to that, have a look at what integration options again. Once again, integration options, how is it going to save you and your staff time, money? How is it going to make your staff happy employees? How is it going to allow you to focus your efforts on doing other things in your business other than just manual data entry all day? And thirdly to that, particularly with this type of tool, I think it's really just a good idea to try them out. Most of these have very similar features. And often the biggest thing that I find with project management tools is that they go with, I find it makes sense to go with what makes sense with the way that you work, both from a workflow perspective, but also work out what is intuitive for both you and your staff. Because a lot of the packages often do the same things, but they do it in sometimes quite different ways. So it's a matter of just sort of firing them up, playing around with them. A lot of them have free trials. Check out what works for you and your staff, and then maybe go down that route. But obviously consider the other things like integration and your industry specific stuff first. Cool, and then we're moving on to brainstorming. We are getting towards the end here, I promise, guys. One of the biggest challenges of not being in the same room together is if you just wanted to have a quick brainstorm or chat about something. If you're not in the same physical space, you can't get together and just sit in the same room and nut something out on a whiteboard or on a big piece of butcher's paper together. You can't do that, obviously. So luckily there are a lot of online tools that allow you to do this kind of stuff, but virtually. So my three big go-to tools here, and they ask for slightly different things. If you're looking for something to try and replace sticky notes for sort of brainstorming purposes, there's a product called Miro, which does this extremely well. I would definitely check that one out. If you want something that allows you to sort of to have a collaborative work space or whiteboard, then Stormboard is a good option here. Or if you're just looking to do mind maps and just sort of map out concepts and how they might be related to each other, then there's a really cool and low cost collaboration tool called Coggle. So many of these do allow you to collaboratively work on the same sort of workspace together at the same time. Then you can just be on a regular sort of Zoom call or even a regular phone call together. Or the other option is to use something like Zoom, just have one person kind of driving the ship and then just use like a screen sharing tool in Zoom or Microsoft Teams, just so everybody can see and be on the same page, and you have one person controlling or facilitating that mind mapping session. Cool. So just to summarize today, as I said, there are a heap of software solutions available. If you have a need for something or a challenge for something that I haven't talked about today, best advice I can give is go and Google it, or you can come and talk to us as an advisor at the Australian Small Business Advisory Service. One of the things here is just embracing the move to asynchronous working methodologies. It's becoming the new norm, and pretty much all the tools that I've described today will allow you to assist with this transition. And just a reminder that staff inevitably are going to have interruptions at home as well as work. Yeah, I mean, as today, things are going to be more challenging with kids around. There's a lot of homeschooling going on. Having the fridge nearby, as I said, is a challenge. But so the end goal we need to do is to try and minimize unnecessary work-related interruptions so that they have a better chance of sort of working for longer periods of time and being more productive overall when they are working in remote locations. And I think it's really important, just to summarize this, you wherever possible, try and keep people connected and feeling part of the team. Cool. We've reached the end of the webinar, guys. So if you do have any questions, feel free to whack them in the Q&A. I'm going to be sticking around probably for another sort of 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how many questions that we get. So in your Zoom interface, depending on how it's laid out, either down the bottom or up the top, you will have a Q&A function. You can just click on that. It'll bring up a window and will allow you to put in a question if you do want to ask me any questions. So what I might do is, I don't have any questions sitting here just yet, but, and we do have quite a few people on the call. So if you do have any questions, pop them in there. I'm just going to take maybe a 60-second break, and then I'm just going to come back and I'm going to answer everybody's questions. All right, guys, looks like we've got a few questions coming through now. So the first one we've got is, do you think post-COVID-19 that a lot of people will continue to work from home as they've got used to it? Well, there's two sides to this question, I think. I think employees are probably to some degree going to want to work from home. There's a lot of people that I have seen that have said they want to be back at work to some degree because they miss the human contact. But in general, I think that after COVID-19 and after we go back to work, I think employers to some degree are going to be more flexible and allow more staff members to work from home. I saw a news article yesterday, actually, which was that Twitter just announced that their entire workforce moving forward are allowed to work from home permanently. So I think there will be a move in that direction. Employers are obviously realizing that they're getting similar levels of employee productivity, even though people are working remotely. By using the tools that we've discussed today, I think they're getting similar levels of assurance, I guess, or they're finding ways to keep their employees productive and engaged and feeling part of the team. So I think it definitely will become more of a trend. It's definitely, we were going in that direction anyway, and I certainly think it's accelerated that to a large degree. So I've got another question here from Rebecca. How do you manage assets when staff are working remotely? Do you have an asset register, or is there another way to keep track of company-owned assets? To be honest, I think not too much needs to change too much on this front. You still will have, I mean, when things are purchased, you will have them going onto an asset register, or at least you probably should have them going onto an asset register. And there are tools for managing assets, particularly, I mean, there's different types of assets, obviously, but if we're talking about IT or technology related assets, then there are a lot of tools available that can easily track these assets and keep tabs on them, I guess. So, and a lot of these are being sort of, well, they kind of have always been this way, but there's definitely a trend to making sure that they work effectively when items are connected in remote locations and so forth. So, yeah, just to summarize, yeah, I don't think there's going to be too much to change on that front in terms of managing assets. But obviously it comes down to an issue of trust as well. Are you allowed to take the laptop home? Obviously, businesses needed to make that choice in a very quick manner when it came to COVID-19. So, and overwhelmingly, they probably chose to allow people to take assets home, and they just had to trust them, I guess. They didn't really have a choice, and I guess we'll see the effects of that and maybe work out how good or bad of a decision that was in the coming months. Next question, is there a standard KPI or touch points so we can ensure the productivity of staff members? I guess to answer this question, I mean, every business is going to be different in terms of their KPIs. What I would say on this front is making sure that I mean, you can set any type of KPIs, right? But I would make sure that you try and base the KPIs on outcomes-based things. So there's no point just tracking time for the sake of tracking time. If people are working smarter and they're outputting more in terms of productivity and delivering more to customers and delivering more for the business, then that's what you kind of want to promote and structure your KPIs around, in my opinion. But this is probably a little bit outside the scope of this webinar in general, but a lot of the tools that we did discuss, like the project management tools, they do have time tracking features in them. Whether you do want to use them is entirely up to you. But they also have a lot of other tools in them for tracking other KPIs other than just time as well. So that's something that I would definitely consider looking at if you do want to keep tabs on very specific KPIs within your business. Cool. All right, guys, looks like I've answered all the questions here. If you do want to get in touch, I probably should have had something on the last slide, but my email address is ross.minney, that's ross.minney @ithouse.net.au. I'm happy to answer any queries. And yeah, look us up on social media. It'll be under IT House on Facebook or Dev House on Facebook, and definitely go and connect with Business Station on Facebook and other social media channels as well. So you can keep in tune with what else is going on in that sphere. And there's lots of workshops coming up on a range of different topics. I'm going to sign off for today, but thanks for being with us, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thank you.